All right, hello and welcome. This is copyright and the realm of forms. So the reason why I wanted to make this video is because I am interested in the metaphysical underpinning of laws. I think all laws and all ethical claims presuppose metaphysics. And I'd like to demonstrate that here with copyright law. So what inspired me to make this video was that I was doing some reading for a class. And for this class, we had to read a specific article called The 10 Rules of Copyright for Screenwriters. And this is by Elliot Groove. And in it, there is a quote that I'll read for you now. Copyright law around the world is based on a simple premise. Surrounding the planet Earth, there's a cloud of spirituality, of ideas. Any two people at the same time can pull down the same idea, and ideas are free. So our ability to understand the difference between an abstract object as being distinct from an instantiated object is essentially what copyright here is protecting. An instantiated object would be something specific. It would be like a song or a story, like a specific story, or a movie. It could be really anything. But that structure that is being borrowed is something that no one can own. It's an abstract structure. It's not instantiated in a particular thing, like a chair or a movie or a human being. It's a structure without any kind of body, and it's something that's used by multiple distinct bodies. And it's what makes a movie essentially a movie is its abstract structure that a specific movie instantiates, right? Now, obviously, there is a parallel to be drawn here between this kind of metaphysical claim and that of Platonism. So in Plato, there is a concept called remembrance or recollection. And so what recollection refers to is our soul's immortality. All souls are immortal according to Plato, and they are reborn and born and die eternally, over and over and over again. And the consequence of this is that all souls have innate knowledge in them. Our intuition of these abstract forms are a part of our soul. So when we learn something in one of our lives, we're not really learning it as in something that just kind of comes out of the blue and it's completely novel. Because that whatever's specific about the thing that we've experienced in our life actually corresponds to an eternal form that our soul has eternal contact with. And our soul is just being currently instantiated in this body, currently meeting another instantiated form, but they coexist in an eternal, more fundamental state. So the realm of forms in Plato is the idea that there is this kind of cloud, like this article is talking about. There is a metaphysical space or field or point where all knowledge exists, but not just knowledge, also possibility. And that's kind of how you can think about it if you're confused about what is a form. It's essentially a possibility of something. It's what makes that thing essentially that object even before that object is instantiated, right? So like chairs, for instance, aren't impossible before there are chairs. I mean, before the first human built the first chair, chairs were still possible, right? And architects know this pretty intimately, where they design buildings that they're not just pulling out of their ass. They're not just making up a form of a building and using what we think of as an imagination, which is just a product of a physical brain, but they're actually, delving into this cloud of possible, this matrix of possibility, and they're pulling from it what can be built in the physical world, and then some people build that building. So that implies that structure it comes before structure and form precede physical instantiation in actual matter. So where this information is stored is actually in something that is referred to in Eastern tradition as the Akashic record. So what the Akashic record is, kind of like the universe's mind. It's a mind outside of a human brain, and it stores all information, all wisdom, and you can access it through, or it's said that you can access it through meditation and other spiritual practices and disciplines. Right, so the best way that I can maybe express this idea or explain it in simpler terms is through an analogy of a radio. A radio it can pick up signals that surround it at all times because of the structure of the radio, not necessarily the combination of its parts in any order or just its random assortment of the materials, but actually like the harmonious and sophisticated structure allows it to transmit or read certain signals. Now, obviously, forms and the Akashic record, this is a metaphysical thing. It's not just some physical phenomenon that is waiting to be discovered. It's something outside of the physical world that is ordering it. So if there is this kind of conscious space outside of the mind, or outside of the human mind, that is, it would, in a sense, surround everything and is free for us to use because of our structured minds, not because of individual brain cells or any one brain cell. It's actually something that or just like a product of random configurations of matter. It's actually something that we have a mind because the structure of the mind is being expressed in matter. And copyright law assumes that there is this field of ideas, and it seems to find this quite useful because people do have the same ideas at the same time, or have the same ideas without any kind of contact with one another. So there seems to be some kind of underlying reality of this claim. And so similarly, Platonism argues for this central point or field that contains all information, and that this corresponds not only with ideas, but also with every structure. All physical structures in the world are not just matter, but they're also the form that congeals matter into specific shapes and also shapes our minds. So this increasingly enters more and more abstract and more general forms that eventually, govern all more specific, more instantiated forms, right? So for Plato, this also included beauty, goodness, abstract numbers, the concepts that underlie numbers like unity and multiplicity. And I think we can say then that the mind itself is a kind of microcosm of this field. It contains the information for physical and abstract objects that we interact with in our personal lives, and ultimately our minds work as something greater than the sum total of its parts. So you can't attribute consciousness, you can't attribute this field of information to any specific part of the brain, and it seems to precede it. We can't reduce our life or inner life or self-awareness to a part of our biology. So I thought I would give some examples of this. Now, there are numerous examples of scientists in different fields discovering similar or exact same processes at the same time or parallel to one another. And I could talk about these, but I find that people often write this off as either being a product of some kind of zeitgeist or just like a natural. Some people have linear theories of progress that we'll, given similar circumstances, will come to the same conclusions, and so they write it off as just like they allow individual human minds to stay as individual minds, and that these products of consciousness are actually coming from separate, distinct minds, and they only parallel each other because of some notion of technological progress. But my assertion is that this technology already exists. In a sense, we just have to download it, and so in that sense, like, progress kind of doesn't exist. Although that it could be a separate video. So one of the examples that I wanted to actually bring up and expound on was something in the article that I was reading, and in it, the writer, Elliot Groove, talks about an experiment that American scientists did in a collection of islands in the South Pacific. They found 6 islands on which lived a unique species of monkey, totaling about 10,000. 1/5 of the islands grew sweet potatoes, but none of the monkeys ate sweet potatoes. Approximately 600 monkeys lived on the 6 islands, one without sweet potatoes. The scientists introduced sweet potatoes and trained a few monkeys to dig up the sweet potatoes. Then take the sweet potatoes, wash them in the ocean, and eat them. A strange thing happened when approximately 100 of the 600 monkeys were digging up sweet potatoes, taking them to the ocean, washing them, and eating them. Suddenly, the monkeys on other islands started to dig up sweet potatoes, take them to the ocean, wash them, and eat them. And I thought that was pretty amazing, because then we can sort of really show that there is not a anthropocentric view of this sort of realm of forms idea. It's actually something that, like, permeates all life, and certainly all conscious life, that a group of monkeys can kind of like download this information and use it to adapt to their situation. And it also exists in philosophy, this concept of sharing information, and that real information, what's really real, is eternal. There's a school of thought called perennialism, which posits that many cultures, in fact, some would say that all cultures, have a similar metaphysics, or at least ancient metaphysics, that at the very least implies this Akashic record, implies the realm of forms. And I mean, you could say that even the very fact that Platonism and Hinduism and all of these different traditions themselves have a concept of the Akashic record, or the realm of forms, that itself could be an instance in which we share this sort of perennial wisdom that we can all access. But they also have parallels in morality and politics and theology that can be attributed to sort of this field that we have access to, this field of information. So there is an interesting question here. Where are the forms? Where are they contained? I kind of touched upon this before, that it's not in matter, right? So, like, the essence of a chair isn't exclusively in a specific chair or all chairs until they disappear from the physical world, because that would make evolution and the development of structure over time impossible. There has to be some kind of formal structure that transcends time and transcends matter as well. It's not reliant on the mind. We're not putting our imagination on to the physical world and saying, here's form. It's ultimately something that, like I said before, is a matrix of possibility. So it allows objects a certain level of reality. And I also talked about before how forms are reliant on other forms to exist, right? They are contingent on more fundamental forms. And eventually, if there are any two forms, fundamental forms that are left in the universe, they still require a third fundamental form, or I should say a first. There's the one. So if I don't think this is true, but let's just say that all objects rely on geometry as their fundamental states, as their fundamental essences. Those geometric forms still require numerical forms, like a triangle requires the form of 3, that an object can somehow be a set of ones, a multiplicity, but also be, a set together as 3. And this still requires a further form, which is the form of multiplicity, in that there are 3 objects that belong to a set, but then also a concept of unity, that you can even talk about any one object at all, or a group of objects, or just like anything would require just like a fundamental oneness in order to understand, or use, or interact with at all. And this sort of implies that the forms don't exist separately from each other. They're all interconnected. So if they all exist in one place, they all exist in oneness, and it kind of is a infinite version, a non-human infinite version of consciousness, then this can be seen as the mind of God. And then we can kind of understand this concept a little bit better, I think. The Platonic ideals in human collective consciousness or unconsciousness mirror the ideals in the infinite intelligence of God. So going back to the idea that all laws and morals require metaphysics to base their validity off of, all claims about what's right and wrong require a further claim about what's real. So there seems to be no escaping making certain definitive claims about what is real when you create regulations and laws for things, especially if they're meant to be taken seriously. The law as we currently have it, at least when we're talking about intellectual property, assumes that there is a kind of Platonic mind outside of human intelligence. Now, I think that the idea of God in law, when you bring God up in law, people get a little nervous because they think of some kind of draconian theocracy. But I don't think it's inherently problematic, the concept of God in law, because there really is no escaping metaphysical claims in legal tradition and forming new laws as well, because ultimately you're ascribing desirability and goodness and justice to the world. And so if there's going to be any kind of stable claim or discovery of what is naturally good, like maybe some kind of natural law, I think you would have to embark on this sort of Platonic philosophical journey. So connecting rightness and wrongness to your first principles, I think, is incredibly useful in forming the basis of law. However, I do think it's important to remember that no human intelligence is perfect. We can't fully know the mind of God that's perfect, but you can gain a kind of infinitesimal understanding of reality through our own finite intelligence, through interacting with our own very finite window into these forms. And we can at the very least draft laws that are divinely inspired for us to live on a maybe a more human scale. But it's still important, I think, to address the fact that we're imperfect, and we should kind of bring a level of humility and skepticism to this endeavor. But in conclusion, I think the material world itself is a small, finite projection from a singular point, but that this point has infinite complexity. The mind of God, this dimensionless being that all forms are contingent on, this thing is where all complexity comes from. It's where all the expansive and prolific nature of this metaphysical space, although calling it a space is problematic because I don't think it necessarily has extension in the way that we experience it, but it is eternal and it's infinite, and it's I think where we should base our law off of. And so hopefully this isn't too much of a ramble and is somewhat coherent. This is my first time making a video on YouTube. So yeah, I'd like to use this more of as a format to just get out my ideas and maybe have discussions with people. So if I can get my act together a little bit, I would like to maybe put out a video every week if I could, but maybe just every other week. The next one I'm planning is either going to be on sort of the teleology of the state and maybe talk about the Platonic form of the Republic, in Plato's Republic, obviously, or the primacy of political dictatorship. So either way, I'm going to have fun with this. Thank you. Yeah, let me know what you think about this, and like and subscribe. I hope you have a good day.